Hey there, how there, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter and welcome you to another video for the 91-92 Stone Cold hockey season. Now, of course, you'll see the teams play one or two games, and really, that's unusual. If you're a hanger on of my stuff, you know that I usually do at least 3 games per team of the set team in one video. I might do 4, 5, 6, depending on how many losses or ties they have. But I only did one Chicago Blackhawks game. Why? Well, it's because it is the 75th anniversary season in the NHL in 91-92. So and all 6 teams played on opening night, original 6 teams. So I did the Blackhawks. Obvious. So anyway, the Chicago Blackhawks, we won our first game against the Detroit Red Wings. We bounced back to beat the Leafs, I believe. So now we are playing. The only major difference between the 91-92 season and the 90-91 season, as I talked about last video, was that the San Jose Sharks are now in the NHL. The 22nd team and a team that San Jose almost got the team from the Minnesota North Stars. The Gunn brothers wanted to move the team to San Jose, but DeAngelo said, no, you sell to other owners, and the Sharks ended up getting an expansion team. And their teal jerseys were, and like the Sharks logo was one of the biggest sellers in 91-92. Oh, and I forgot to mention that the North Stars owner, the guy who got the Minnesota North Stars from the Guns, was someone named Norm Green. Minnesota fans will probably curse me out for that. Anyway, so we've only played one game. We won't go through the whole shtick of the standings and the highlights. So yeah, Chicago takes on Minnesota. Minnesota plays their first game. The North Stars, John Casey, the hero of the 90-91 playoff run for the North Stars, they'll face the Dominator, Dominic Hasek. People forget that he was once a Chicago Blackhawk goalie, and he did do decently in the 92 playoffs because of Mike Keenan switching him and Belfour every so often. Hasek was then traded to Buffalo for Stefan Beauregard, which wasn't a bad move, and a fourth-round pick, which actually was Eric Daze, and Daze was dazzling if he was healthy. Nevertheless, he's the backup. Ed Belfour, the main guy who actually missed the first few games of the season because of a contract holdout. Jimmy Waite had to come in to play for Belfour, and Ray LeBlanc would play later on as USA Stars goalie. The Minnesota North Stars only had 2 goalies, John Casey and Darcy Wakalek, who actually won the Cup with Buffalo in the previous season, the fantasy season. Our Blackhawks, we have JR, number 27 in your program, one of the best American players of all time. Steve Lorimer, who had an 880 game Ironman streak broken because of contract problems, and then was subsequently traded to the Rangers. Michel Goulet, great former Nordique, turned Blackhawk. Brian Noonan, who would play for the 94 Rangers and all that. He was traded away alongside Stefan Matteau to the Rangers for the want of Tony Amante. Dirk Graham, he was picked up. The Blackhawks had him. He was the first black captain in Blackhawks history. Although he looked white, he was a mixed race. Mike Hudson, future member of the 94 Rangers as well. Chris Chelios, his second season coming back to his hometown of Chicago from Montreal in the trade for Tony Savard. Steve Smith, who the Blackhawks picked up for Dave Manson. And it was a massive move because Edmonton fans just did not let Steve Smith forget about his boo-boo in the 86 Stanley Cup playoffs, even though the Oilers won 2 straight Stanley Cups after that. Actually, they won 3 cups. Steve Smith had 3 rings with Edmonton, and they still drove him out of town. Pricks. Greg Gilbert, another member of the 94 Rangers, he's on that team. Jocelyn Lemieux, Keith Brown, Ken Crichton, Mike Peluso, Brian Marchment, Stefan Matteau, Mike Stapleton, Frank Cusera, Dan Fissette, Steve Conroy, Steve Thomas, Igor Kravchuk, John Challey, former Islander, and Tony Hardrick. The North Stars. They had Alf Dolan, big Alf Dolan, Mike Bodano, number 1 draft pick in the 1988 season. It was actually weird. When the North Stars got Mike Bodano, number 1 in 1988, he could have been a Toronto Maple Leaf because the Leafs actually beat the Red Wings on the final day of the season and faulted past the North Stars into the playoffs. The only problem was if the Leafs didn't make the playoffs, they had the number 1 pick. True story. Dave Gagne, who in last year's video game version actually was scoring goals left, right, and center. I think he was third. Brian Bellows, Kitchener. That's right, former Kitchener Ranger. Mike Craig, Todd Ellick, Brian Propp, great player in junior for Brandon. Bobby Smith, who jumped from the North Stars to the Habs to the North Stars. Neil Broaden, the star of Minnesota, a Minnesota native and member of Miracle on Ice. Gaetan Duchesne, who was a shadow for the Blues against the Blues and Blackhawks guys. Darian Hatcher, whose brother Kevin plays for Washington, but Darian, decent player for the North Stars. Damien. Mark Burrell, Basil McRae, who was in the Mighty Ducks movie, the first one. Stu Gavin, Mark Tedority, Jeb Johnson. I think Pittsburgh had Jim Johnson and traded him for Larry Murphy. He who shall not be named, because not only was he a crappy Leaf captain in the 90s, but the fact is that he was indicted on a field or manslaughter of one Keith Magnuson. Shane Shula, also a goon and a shadow. Brian Glenn, Craig Ludwig, owner of only one pair of shin pads in his own career. Derek Smith, Steve Maltese, Chris Dalquist, and David Shaw. Catch it there. Former Rangers defenseman David Shaw. I didn't know he played for the North Stars. 5 minutes into the game, you have a chance? Oh. 1 minute later, Gresham. It's Gilbert in the box. Steelers. He popped that one up. Pop from Ellicott 90. 3 minutes later, still a hit. 1 minute later, Gresham. With Shaw for 2. Can we take advantage? We can. Skier. Pepper go. Who shot JR? JR shot who? JR shoot the puck. Shot the puck. From Keith Brown, 1-1. That's my new taunt. 2 minutes later. It was not 1 but 2 hits, but no penalty. And then we get Caruso. Goes out. Chance for Gagne. Nope. Purdue. Gagne, of course, in English is in French is to win. He didn't win that one. That was described as Marchment. Craig misses it. Shutsky or Shurdy. JR his second of the night from Matteau and Peluso. 2-1. And Minnesota gets agitated. Sherlock to the box. Prick. Steve Smith. 5 minutes later. Done it. He scored that one. 1 minute later. It's Mike Modano. Can we take advantage? Nope. Lemieux and Stapleton can't. Halfway through, 3 minutes. Shot. Oh, Minnesota missed. 2 minutes later. There's a fight between Peluso and McRae. Peluso knowing what he has to do. 2-2 after 2. In game number 2. 3 minutes later. Trotskyiers. He ain't Robert Goulet, but he's close. It's Michel Goulet, his second from Kravchuk and Steve Smith. 4 minutes later? No. Much later. From the clock, Skiers. On the river, Hudson. He scores from Mr. Marchman, 4-2. Hey, Hetty. 4 minutes later. No. Timing, empty net. And Minnesota can't do anything. We win 4-2. Nicely done. Roenick, Goulet, Hudson. All right, Sunday. We host the Devil Dogs. Okay, so we're 2-0. They're 1-0. And the Dominator is back in the net, back to back, but he's in net against Craig Billington, the backup goalie to the Devils. So yeah, Billington, the star of the Canadian hockey, the Canadian Olympic team. I believe that's him, or he was one. I can't remember, but anyway, his story. Chris Terrari was the main goalie for the Devils. Martin Brodeur, yes, that Martin Brodeur. He was the third string goalie. He played a few games. He wasn't featured in the '92 playoffs. A few years later, he was named Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year. Chad Erickson, that's number 4. Fun fact about the Devils: they had Sean Burke at one time, but Burke wanted to play in the Olympics, so the Devils said, "Screw you," and he fled to the Olympics, and then the Devils traded him to Hartford. Anyway, the Devils had Claude Lemieux, the enforcer, Stefan Richer, who they picked up, former 50-goal scorer from the Habs, in exchange for Kirk Muller. Well, Montreal kind of ran him out of town because they didn't understand Richer's mental health problems. Peter Stastny, the former Quebec Nordique icon, now a Devil. Kevin Todd, Claude Filgrain, the pride of Haiti, who, as of this video, actually are in the World Cup of Soccer. That's right, they qualified. First time since 1974. Tom Shorsky, another Hab. He was a decent player. And a guy who 4 years later actually screwed the Devils out of a playoff spot playing for the Senators. Scott Stevens, Kitchener. That's right, former Kitchener Ranger Scott Stevens. In fact, Scott Stevens was a Washington Star player, and then the Blues signed him to compensation. And then all of a sudden, when the Blues signed Brandon Shanahan, they had to give up a player to the Devils, and it ended up being Scott Stevens. Brutal mistake by the Blues because Scott Stevens had a Hall of Fame career. Randy McKay, Valerie Selapukin, who had a big tying goal for the Devils in the 94 playoffs against the Rangers. But, well, for that. Alex Casatona from the Soviet Union. Dougie Brown before he went to Detroit. Laurie Boschman, the born again Christian. Bruce Driver. Ranger fans hate that name. Eric Weinrich. David Malley, former Hab. Pat Conacher. Dave Barr, not the golfer, but the hockey player. So Daniel Seeger, what a name. Alex Semak. Slava Fetisov. A few years. Troy Milan. Gerald Scalade. Candenico. Patrick Sundstrom. Tommy Umbley. Four minutes later. Into the game, I should say. We're red. Oh! Another four. They score! Kitchener! Scott Stevens from Richer and Todd. I know. Why am I saying Kitchener even though they're opposing team? Because I love you. That's what. Because I love you. That's why. 2 minutes later. Okay. Puck in the crate. His third for Larmer and Brown. One minute later. It's Richer. Monick. Oh, that almost was disaster. Chicago penalty or grab. Shotsky or Devils. Weinrich from Mallet and Lemieux. Chicago Jets, a tie, no. Much better. Kelly and the Devils. Claude Lemieux. That's the Lemieux. Claude and Jocelyn. I think they were related. Much later. 5 minutes later. They score! Boschman from Pukin and Lemieux. Now I think we're going to lose. So our winning streak might be over. I can't believe we could only score one goal on Craig freaking Billington. Well, we lose. We're fucked. Ugh. Hockey pucks. How the hell did we lose to the Devils? Our unbeaten season, our 2-0 streak is over. Boston finally loses the game to the Rangers, 4-1, and Toronto puts a snowman on St. Louis. Montreal 3-0. Montreal's on fire. Devils lose in overtime to Quebec. Serves you right. Vancouver loses to Winnipeg. I think Montreal's the only team undefeated, right? Oh, Winnipeg's 2-1. So Montreal and Winnipeg. We're Chicago. Because we're on a bye. We play Vancouver. Now, because we lost or tied, that means the next game must be simulated. Unless it's an original six game, then we have to play that. But Vancouver is not original six. And we lose 4-3 as Gamble beats Belfour. Vancouver was up 3-0. Adams, Larionov, and Ronning scoring. Chicago goals by Graham, Ronick, and then Creighton before Pavel Bure put in his second, the rookie. Montreal losing to Detroit. So finally they lose a game. Winnipeg beats San Jose 4-3. So now they're now the only undefeated team left. We go to Washington. Winnipeg loses to LA, so that's it. Now we lost, but we gotta play Washington. Well, we simulate because we lost the last game. And we get our asses whipped. Bullprairie beats Belfour. Only goal by Tonelli. Christiaks, Iafredi, Hatcher, Johansson, Cizzarelli, May, and Christiaks. We have lost 3 straight. Unreal. Now we got to play the Sharks. We would play the Sharks, but the rule is we can't play because we lost. But we win 2-1. Belfour beats Hackett. The future Blackhawk goalie. Steve Lerner, Mike Hudson for us. Doug Wilson, former Blackhawk icon, scoring for the Sharks. And I believe the Islanders are the last winless team left, right? Yep. So we're in 2-1. So we play. How many more did we play? One more, right? Yeah, we play one more. That's right. I'm trying to remember how many more we play. Where is Chicago? Where is Chicago on this? Where are we? Oh, there we are. We got Edmonton. So Edmonton comes to town and at Belfour versus Norm Foster. So Edmonton decided to pick up this guy named Norm Foster to become their main backup goalie. Bill Ranford was the main goalie for the Oilers. He did well. Peter Ing was also for the Oilers. I know Peter Ing could be a fur, but it's a goalie, an Asian goalie. Peter Ing actually was the star goalie for the Leafs in the 1991 season, and then was traded to Edmonton in that 7-player deal. Fuhrer, Brewery Bay, and Glenn Anderson went to Toronto. Ing and 3 others went to Edmonton. We'll talk about them. And then Ron Tugnut, as the Oilers needed some playoff toughness, and Ron Tugnut would be the certifiable backup. Okay, so the old drop, Vince Dompoose. Yes, he was one of the Leafs traded to Edmonton alongside Peter Ing. People forget that Vince Dompoose actually started his career as a Leaf for like 7 seasons and had those 4 goals in the 91 All-Star game in Chicago, mind you. And then Toronto turned to Edmonton. And then Dompoose the next year would be traded to Montreal for, I think, Shane Corson. Joe Murphy, who was a pretty good player, #1 overall pick by the Red Wings, he had some behavioral problems and then was traded from Detroit to Edmonton in 1989 in the Jimmy Carson deal. That's Carson go to Detroit because he was a malcontent. Unfortunately, if you know Joe Murphy's story and read his book, of homelessness, it's weird. Craig Simpson 2 years ago was named the oil got the Stanley Cup winning goal. Craig Simpson also actually was a #1 draft pick by the no, he was the #2 pick by the Penguins after the Leafs picked up Wendell Clark. Pittsburgh wanted to make the trade, but they ended up getting Craig Simpson. Scott Mellenby, known as the Rat Guy, 3 years later with the Panthers, starting that rat thing. Peter Kleeman, #85, the best player to wear #85, the year of my birth. Although that was the year he fled communist Czechoslovakia. And Peter Kleeman almost screwed himself over. He wanted more money and a new car, and almost decided to go back to Czechia because Detroit didn't want to give him that. Bernie Nichols, That was the big piece the Edmonton Oilers picked up in the Mark Messier trade, trading Messier to New York. Kelly Bookberger, who had spent many years in oil drops and as a fresher. Anatoly Semenov, Dave Manson, who was traded by us to Edmonton for Steve Smith. Steve Smith is not making a homecoming because he didn't play. He played in Edmonton, yeah, but this game's in Chicago. Craig McTee, he actually served a year in prison. Esa Tikkanen, known as the massive Finnish shadow, and the hero of the '91 playoffs for the Oilers in the first round against the Flames. Joseph Baranek, Martin Jelena, who was a decent player, part of the kid line, but people will remember him for his overtime heroics, starting in 2002 with the Canes. Yes, he was the guy who beat the Leafs and sent the Canes to the Stanley Cup Finals. And then 2 years later, would actually score the series-winning goals for the Flames in the first three playoff series, and could have been a fourth if that puck was steamed over the line, which ABC said it did, but CBC surprisingly did not. Norm McIver, Mark Lamb, part of the kid line, with Murphy and Jelena. Luke Richardson, another piece moved from Toronto to Edmonton. He played over 1,000 years, games. Jeff Smith, Craig Hoggood, Kevin Lowe, who was getting on in years, Craig Muni, Louis DeBrusque, who was, you know, doing his job. He was part of that Ranger Edmonton trade. Troy Millette. Edmonton actually picked up Troy Millette as a free agent move, and then that's when. No, I think Adam Graves went to the Rangers, and then Troy Millette was picked up. Anyway, Jeff Boom also there, but he went to the Rangers later. 4 minutes later, damn it, it's Steve Thomas. Power play, Semenoff gets hit. No chance, but they score. He scores his third from Mac T and Murphy. Semenoff. 2 minutes later. Hit on JR. 4 minutes later. Questions? Luke Richardson. And we don't do anything. Yeah, Semenoff's name. Yes, I know. It's Murphy, but nice job by Belfour to get in the zone. Auto zone. 5 minutes into the second. They have a chance, and they score. Nichols from Semenoff makes it 2-0. 4 minutes later. Double hit. 5 minutes later. He scores! Who shot JR? JR shot the puck. His fourth from Creighton and Goulet. 3 minutes later. Oh, he's rattled. Fortunately, though, it's only 2-1 after 2. I thought it would be worse. On us. Take a penalty. Can we take advantage? No, we can. And we give up a shorty to Klima from Dompoos and Murphy. Fuck. And a chance for Goulet. Oof. We're killing the clock. Lamb. But he's still in the power play. Hudson. Brown and Lemon. It's a 3-2. Have a chance. We watch it. Edmonton wins 3-2. Unreal. Norm Foster beats us. Are you kidding me? That guy? I actually want to know about Norm Foster's career in the NHL. No, ice hockey. He played 13 games in the NHL for Boston and Edmonton. So he played 3 games in the 1991 season and then 10 in 92. 5-3. He was in World Juniors in 1985. That's the backup, I guess. Norm Foster. What a name. Anyway, Edmonton beats us, so that means our next game must be simulated. Well, we're in St. Louis, so that means it can be simulated because it's not an original 16. And we tie St. Louis 4-4. Belfour and Cujo tied. We were down 4-2. Larmer and Conroy scored. Unfortunately for the Blackhawks, that's a tie, which means we have to simulate the next game. Well, it's against St. Louis, and we beat them 3-2. Anyhow, Belfour beats Cujo, Creighton, Ronick, and Graham. Scoring Sutter and Basson for St. Louis. Rangers put the snowman on Edmonton. Toronto times Vancouver. We go to Pittsburgh in a Stanley Cup prelude. Both teams are second. We have 9 points. Detroit's 5-2. We're at 9. Minnesota and Toronto are there. St. Louis much. Vancouver, Calgary, LA, Edmonton, and Smythe. Winnipeg's hanging on. San Jose is just second. They only have 2 points. Second worst is 5 points. Montreal crushing it in the Adams, Hartford, Boston, Buffalo. Quebec's only 1 point back of Buffalo. Washington, New York, and New Jersey doing that. Islanders, Philly, Pittsburgh. So yeah, Brent Sutter, who we'll pick up from the Blackhawk on the Islanders, he's got 7. Adam Creighton has 6, but he'll be headed to the Islanders soon. Wash Double Day, Kirk McLean, your 3-star goalies. And Grand First 2-4. Mike Brennan has 5 ties. Has all those ties, but Fuhrer has a 303 goals against. Yeah, 3-1, like Fitzpatrick Terry. And then Jet Diamond